Hi, my name is Kristen. This is Kristen Craves Books. So I'm here with my most anticipated February releases, and there are a ton of them. I'm actually overwhelmed by just how many there truly are, and I want to read them all. I know that won't happen, but I want to put them on your radar and get your opinions on them. So we will dive right in, starting with February 1st. And I was actually lucky enough to receive a physical arc of this book, and this is The Christie Affair by Nina de Gramont. And this is sort of a reimagining of what happened to Agatha Christie when she went missing for 11 days. And that actually happened. That's based on a true story. But I think it's important to go into this one knowing that so much of this is fictionalized. Yes, Agatha Christie went married. Yes, her husband had an affair. The story is told from her husband's mistress, but in this version, the character is completely different name, not based on the true mistress. So we learn her motivations, what she imagines Agatha Christie to be doing during those days where she's missing. So a lot of it is based on fiction. So I think part of what the reviewers are saying is that they expected this to be based more on truth, and it's really not. I feel like Agatha Christie could have been anybody in here, but I did really like the writing. I thought it did some interesting things. I really thought the ending was different, and I liked learning more about our narrator's motivations and where the story went, and I liked the setting. So I just think you have to go into this one with an open mind and the right expectations, but I did think it was interesting. And then the next one is one that I read an e-arc of, and I'm so excited about it, and that is Finley Donovan Knocks Him Dead, and this is the sequel to Finley Donovan is Killing It, which everybody read last year, it feels like. Everybody loved for good reason. It's such a great, cozy mystery kind of vibe. If you watched Dead to Me on Netflix and loved it as much as I did, at least the first season, I didn't finish the second, but that's a different story. It's very similar vibes. Even the friendships in there are very similar. Everything about it feels very much like Dead to Me, but it's its own unique story, and it's so much fun. So we're following Finley Donovan in the first one, and she is a writer, and she's talking about her book in a cafe, and somebody overhears her and thinks that she's actually a murder for hire, and things kind of unravel from there. So then the second one follows Finley, and she is living with her nanny, Vero, and her two kids, and they find out that somebody in a message board is trying to hire somebody to kill Finley's ex-husband, who is not a great guy, but he is a good father, and she wants to protect her kids. So she is on a mission to figure out who is plotting to kill her ex-husband. And of course, things happen. It's funny. It's got all the same humor as the first one. I think people who love the first one are going to be happy with the installment. But I do wish we got a little bit more character growth from Finley. I feel like we ended the second book where we ended the first one. There wasn't a lot of development, especially in terms of the romance and just her perspective. She can be a frustrating character, but she's fun to read about. And we're definitely set up for an interesting third book in this series, and I cannot wait for that. So I'm excited for everybody to read this one and everybody to talk about it and to get everyone's opinions on that one as well. Next is a book by one of my favorite authors, and it feels like it has been ages since we've had a new book from her, and this is Devotion by Hannah Kent, and I actually pre-ordered the Waterstones edition. It is gorgeous, it has sprayed edges. I will try to insert a picture here if I can find it, but I just love Hannah Kent. She reminds me why I love historical fiction. It used to be my favorite genre, and Burial Rites by Hannah Kent is like up there as one of my top historical fiction books of all time. But Devotion is following two young girls who are growing up in Prussia, and their families are Lutheran, and practicing that religion, that faith in Prussia at this time was illegal. So they board a ship to Australia to escape and to be able to practice their religion freely. And I think the majority of the story takes place on this ship, on this voyage, and we're following these two girls and the hardships that they endure, the connection they have with one another. And I know that this story is deeply researched. It's based on a real voyage, and I just trust Hannah Kent with things like this. She really takes unknown historical events, brings them to life, makes them interesting, and I think a lot of it is based in truth, but then she adds great characters, so I just trust Hannah Kent. I've seen some great reviews for this one because I think it did come out in the UK last year, and I know so many people were raving about it, so excited about that. Next we have a Romeo and Juliet retelling, and this is Ramona and Giulietta, and I've never read Romeo and Juliet retelling before, though These Violent Delights is on my TBR. I know people love that series, and Ramona and Giulietta is actually following to Romeo and Julieta, obviously, and they're from families who have competing restaurants, so they do not get along which I love. I love any romance where food's involved. That really just appeals to me. That's right in my wheelhouse. And then I think Ramon's family is responsible for the failing of Julietta's mom's restaurant, or he steals her taco recipe, something like that. There's some serious tension there, but then Julietta opens a restaurant and it turns out that Ramon is her landlord, so they are forced to work together. And obviously it follows the tropes of Romeo and Juliet, and I cannot wait to read it. It sounds incredible. The next one is by an author who I want to discover this year, and I have a feeling once I read one of her books, I'm going to fall down a rabbit hole and read everything she's ever written, and that is Ruta Sepetys. So her new book is called I Must Betray You, and it's set in communist Russia, which is a time period and setting I've never read from before, at least not that I can remember. And we're following a main character, and I think he is an artist, but he is blackmailed and forced to become an informant against his fellow people and his friends, and he's really put in this uncomfortable position where he has to choose between his safety and being loyal to his friends and family. And I think he gets involved with the revolution, and I think it's just going to be incredible. I know that so many people love Ruta Sepetys' work, and she writes some really incredible YA historical fiction, which is not a genre I've explored too much, but I really hope that this is the year of Ruta Sepetys for me. I've talked about this a lot. Salt of the Sea is going to be my next book, or maybe the book after that, but it's going to happen in February. I'm determined to fall in love with her stuff. Next is another book by one of my favorite authors, and that is Heather O'Neill, and this book is When We Lost Our Heads. And it seems like a lot of Heather O'Neill's books are set in Montreal, which I love, and this one is as well, and it follows two girls. They are friends, which is a trope I love. I love female friendships, and they kind of have a dark, unhealthy obsession with one another, and they're very different. One character is light, optimistic, sunshine, all those kind of things. The other one is really into dark things and kind of sucks the other one into her world. And I think throughout their life, we follow them throughout their life, and they come apart and they go back together and they end up in very different places. And then they're somehow involved in a very major event in Montreal in different ways and are forced to work together. I'm not really sure, but I just love Heather O'Neill so much that I trust her. I've seen incredible reviews of this. I know Reading Maria, she is huge on Instagram. She's also on YouTube. I will link her below. Raved about this, and I've never been so jealous of somebody having an arc in my entire life. I cannot wait for this book. This next one is one that was just put on my radar today, and it sounds really, really good, and it's called Don't Cry for Me by Daniel Black. And this story follows Jacob, who is an elderly man on his deathbed, and he's writing a letter to his son Isaac about their family history, their past, their traumas that maybe have been passed down, and their complicated relationship. And I know that Isaac is gay, and that has affected their relationship. They haven't spoken for many years. So he's dying, Jacob's dying, and just writing a letter, I think a heartfelt letter to Isaac. And I think it's going to be moving. I've heard incredible things about it. I just went down a rabbit hole of reading all these reviews of it, and I just have a really, really good feeling about that one, and I think it's going to be huge once it comes out. So The Great Gatsby just went into public domain, I think in 2021. So we're starting to see a lot of retellings of this story, which is so exciting, because as much as I love the original Great Gatsby, I'm excited for some authors to come and shake up the original story a little bit. And this one that comes out in February is called Beautiful Little Fools by Gillian Cantor. And it begins right after the events of the original story, and we're following the perspectives of three female characters, obviously Daisy Buchanan, Jordan Baker, and Catherine McCoy, who is the sister to Tom Buchanan's mistress, which is an interesting perspective to include, I think. And I believe that the author twists the original ending of The Great Gatsby, so that could be really fun, and I've seen some good reviews of it, and I'm just ready to be back into that story, but in a new way. Then we have a nonfiction that I actually have an e-arc of, and this is A Taste for Poison by Neil Bradbury, and I just thought this was fun. I don't know too much about it. All I know is that the author is exploring different famous poisonings throughout history, and what poisons were used, the science behind it, and just the events and how deadly they were and what happened to these people. So I think that could be really compelling, and I know that poison is used a lot in fantasy novels and in different books and things. So I thought that could be interesting to learn about, kind of a unique way to tell more history about poison, but in a fun way, I think. So I've just been curious about it. Then we have another nonfiction that I have a arc of, and this is The Lives of the $1 Million Babies, Heiresses. So this is by Lauren Thompson, and this is telling the stories of real heiresses throughout history. And I think it looks at so many perspectives of them. Some of them were arrested for terrorism. Some of them played big roles in the civil rights movement. So I think that she is looking at all sides of these women. And I think this could be really intriguing. I've always been fascinated by the world of heiresses. I love this cover, so I'm hoping I can dive into this soon and I really take a lot out of it, learn a lot, and maybe it'll be fun as well. And this author I know, she wrote The Lives of the Mitford Sisters, and I think that was a popular book, and I'm sure this will be well researched. Moving on to February 8th, and the first one I have is No Filters and Other Lies by Crystal Maldonado, who wrote Fat Chance, Charlie Vega last year, and I really enjoyed that. I don't read a lot of YA contemporary, but there are some that intrigue me and I really can take a lot out of and appreciate, and that was one of them. So this one follows a young girl who is a social media influencer, but her entire account is fake. She has stolen somebody else's pictures and is pretending to be somebody else, and I think she meets a girl through DMs and they form a connection, but obviously she's lying about who she is, and then she has a post go viral. The person who she stole the pictures from discovers her and she starts explaining herself. I think it could be some interesting commentary. I'm curious to see how the author handles this subject, and I just really do trust her. I really did love Charlie Vega, so I'm hoping that I fall in love with this character, even though it's a very interesting setup and she might be dislikable at first, but I'm sure we'll understand her motivations and fall in love with her by the end. Too much about, but the tagline was interesting to me. I haven't read a lot in this genre, so that is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes, and this is sci-fi horror, which is so fun. And the tagline is a ghost ship, a salvage crew, and unspeakable horrors. So I think we're following a main character who works on a maintenance crew on a spaceship, and they discover a ship that has gone missing many years ago. I think it was like a luxury cruise, but in space, and it's haunted and things start to happen, and I think it's just going to be a fun, gory horror time, and I'm down for it. Then we have one that I have a physical art from HTC Frenzy, which I'm so thankful for, and this is Lulu and Milagros Search for Clarity by Angela Velez, and this follows these two sisters who go on a road trip. They're completely different from one another, but they soon discover that they have quite a connection and they have more in common than they think. I think a lot of family secrets come out during this time. I know that one of the characters is looking to do a internship at Stanford, and that's why they are going on this road trip together. So I think it's just going to be a fun time. It really did sound great in the HTC Frenzy's virtual event that they do. And I did start this one and I'm already liking the writing, so I think this will be a fun one. Speaking of fun books, the next one is Not the Witch You Wed by April Asher, and this is a fake dating relationship between a magicless witch and a wolf shifter. So that is all I need to know. That sounds like it's going to be a fun time, maybe a good one to read over Valentine's Day. It's been a long time since I read like a paranormal romance. I think this is going to be a cute one. And then the last one that I physically own an ARC of, and again, this is a nonfiction, is The Ex-Boyfriend Yard Sale by Haley McGee. The author actually reached out to me about this one, and it's about the time in her life where she found herself in debt and she decided to sell all the gifts from her ex-boyfriends at a yard sale. And then she kind of falls down a rabbit hole because she didn't know what to price things and what's the value put on emotional attachments to items, and she ends up interviewing her ex-boyfriends, which is very brave. And there are like charts in here, there's like science. I'm just very curious to see what she does with this, but that setup just sounded incredible to me. February 15th, this might be the one that I'm most excited for on this list, and this is a huge month. Like, some of my favorite authors are putting out books this month, but this is the one that stands out to me, and that is Bitter by Quickie Amazy, which is the prequel to Pet, which is one of my favorite books of all time. Everything that Quickie Amazy writes is gold. They are brilliant. So this follows Bitter, who is the mother to the main character in Pet, and it's her time as a teenager discovering art. So really, I don't need more than that. I just know that I loved Pet so much. I will read anything a Quickie Amazy writes. They're blessing us with 2 books this year, and one is coming out in February, and I am so excited. Next is one that looks like so much fun, and I've realized that I love the Bachelor type trope in my romance. I don't watch The Bachelor anymore. I did for years and years, but I just can't watch it anymore. But I do like that trope in my romance for some reason, and this one does kind of a twist on it. So this is All the Right Reasons by Bethany Mangle, and look at this cover. It's adorable. But we're following Kara, who's a teenage girl whose father just married somebody that she cannot stand. So she posts about this and rants about this on social media, and that post goes viral, and a producer of a show that it's like a dating show for single parents finds this video and reaches out to Kara and her mother ends up on this reality show. And I think Kara's actually a character on the show as well, like somehow she plays a role in the show, and she strikes up a romance with the son of another contestant. So that sounds like it could be really, really cute and really, really fun. This next one is one that I've already been recommended a few times. Some people in the blogging community have read it and said that I would really like it, and this is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. Now, I do have a different book by Rebecca Ross I want to read this year because it's part of my 12 challenge, but this one sounds so good, and the synopsis is a bit confusing, but I do know that it's a Scottish fantasy, and I know that there are missing girls involved, and that there's some kind of musician that can use his music to raise up spirits. I don't know, it sounds out there, but I think it's going to be beautiful. I love that kind of fantasy, so I'm intrigued by this one. Then we have a sequel to a book that I keep meaning to read. I actually own the first book, and the publisher sending me the second, and this is Moon Witch Spider King, which is the sequel to Black Leopard Red Wolf, which was a fantasy that really, really intimidates me. But as I get more into fantasy, I think I can commit to this one. I know it's going to be one I have to dedicate a lot of time and attention to, but I've heard it's beautiful. And this is by Marlon James, by the way. And I believe this is a trilogy. I know people just adore this. I think it's going to be graphic, but really beautiful. So I want to do a reading vlog of both of those eventually because it's so out of my comfort zone, but I'm intrigued by it. Okay, we're getting there. February 22nd, we have Delilah Green Doesn't Care, and this is by Ashley Herring Blake. This has been everywhere online. Everybody on Twitter is so excited about this. I'm so excited about this. I cannot wait to get my hands on this. People have arcs. I am so envious. And something about this gives me like Gilmore Girl vibes. Small towns. We're following a main character who swore she would never go back to her small town, but agrees to come and photograph her stepsister's wedding. And she's kind of got like a hate to love thing going on with her stepsister's best friend, who is also in the wedding, and they are forced to work together on this wedding. So I think that could be really cute, and I cannot wait to read it. And another one that you've probably seen around a lot is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O, and this looks so beautiful. I love this cover so much, one of the greatest covers of the year, I think. And it is following a main character who lives on an island where they believe they are being cursed by a sea god. So every year they sacrifice a young girl to the sea god and hoping that he will take her as his bride and the curse will end. So this year it is going to be our main character's brother's girlfriend because she's beautiful and everybody thinks she is amazing. So they think that maybe this is finally when the sea god will accept a bride. And her brother has a plan to save his girlfriend. So he dives into the ocean, and then our main character dives after him, and she ends up in this fantasy world. So that could be so fantastic. I cannot wait for that one. Next is one that I actually just finished reading this morning, and I cannot stop thinking about it. I'm still working out my thoughts, so I will let you know more details in my wrap up. But this is Ecstasia by Claire Legrand. And Claire Legrand wrote Sawkill Girls, which I loved. And this is also YA horror, but they're very different. Ecstasia is, I think, more graphic, but maybe I'm not remembering just how graphic Sawkill Girls was, but a lot of this made me uncomfortable, but it was so well handled. So Ecstasia follows a main character who is nameless in the beginning, and I'm not going to tell you more than that, but she is growing up in this village where they believe that nobody else in the world exists, that their village has been saved by God, and they have to do all these sacrifices to honor God. So there's lots of religious undertones. It's very cult-like in nature as well. It's a very misogynistic society, but then she discovers that she's being lied to, and they're actually witches who possess magic called Ecstasia, and she is being called by the power to join them. But she deeply, deeply believes in the teachings of her village, of her father, of her people. So she's torn. She wants to use the witches to save her village because men in her village are being murdered, and there's just a lot of layers to this. It goes into some interesting places. I did have some pacing issues with it. This will not be for everybody. But if it appeals to you, try the first chapter on Amazon, or I'm sure there's an excerpt somewhere online, and see if you get along with the writing because it's so different. It's one of those books that I really liked, but I'd be reluctant to recommend to everyone. It's not going to be for everyone, but it was interesting. Next is Only a Monster by Vanessa Len, and this is following a character named Joan who goes to her family's house, her extended family's house for the summers, and she thinks it's just going to be a relaxing summer. But then family secrets start to come out, and she realizes that she comes from a family of monsters, and then the guy that she's dating is actually a monster slayer, and I think things go from there. So that could be really fun. It's getting a lot of buzz already. And then last but not least is Fake by Erica Katz, and she wrote The Boys Club, which I know was popular when it first came out. And this is sort of a thriller, and our main character is an art forger, and she wants to get out of this life. And she is hired by a man who is an art collector, and she kind of falls for this world that he's in, all the glitz and glamour, but then she sees the darkness that's underneath. And I think her art forgery past kind of collides with her in the present, and it looks like it's interesting. I love any books about art. I don't think I've ever read anything about art forger before. I've heard that you actually learn a lot about what goes into forging art, so that can be really, really interesting. So there are more books coming out in February that I could have talked about, but I'm losing my voice, and it's just so overwhelming how many books there are. But there's Cherish Farah by Bethany C. Morrow. That's one I'm interested in. Daughters of the Dead Empire. That looks really good. It's an Anastasia retelling. There's another one, Tripping Arcadia. It's a gothic mystery, which looks really fun. So there's so many. I will leave a link to my Goodreads shelf for all these down below. There goes my voice. So thank you all for watching this video. Let me know which ones I missed, because there are many. What's on your radar? Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.